Okay, heading to the next story. So the reason I am highlighting this story is because, we've obviously spoke about the assistant chief of MPD being removed because of residency issues. This has brought about an entire issue or interest in the state law that didn't apply to him, but it raises questions because you don't want this type of situation to happen again. And there were some things in that story that people in the community, I would imagine, were worried about, curious about, wanted answers for. And so city council has taken that and is pushing it forward. So Mayor Paul Young has already removed the assistant chief, Sean Jones, removed him from that position. And so MPD is backfilling with multiple people right now, and then I guess going to ultimately put somebody in that position. But now the city council is moving forward with this whole first responders and not necessarily the residency, but the amount of time that it takes for them to report to work, which I know that they are shift workers, so they have to be to work at a specific time. They know whatever time that is. But now it calls into question. It's kind of a way of putting a residency requirement without putting in a residency requirement. You know what I mean? The law, the state law says there can't be a residency requirement, right? But we can put into place how long it needs to be your response time or your response to work, coming into work. We can do that part. Right now it's a 2-hour window. But if you shorten it to a 30-minute window, now you live in Memphis. So 2 hours, I guess you would live in Paris, Tennessee or something like that. You could live Jonesboro, Oxford, way out. And that's an hour away. So, okay. So, this story is from WRAG. City Council questions Tennessee residency law for first responders. So, here's the question. And I won't worry about the video, but here's the question. Do you need to be a Memphis resident in order to serve on the Memphis Police Department? That was a hot topic of conversation among city council members at Tuesday's meeting. So this was on July 9th, Tuesday's meeting. Just one day after former Assistant Chief Sean Jones was dismissed from the force. A state law passed in 2022 banned any residency requirements for first responders in Tennessee, so the city council has to comply. But there's a loophole that can give the council some control over how far away first responders can live. Everything that happens in Memphis as it relates to violent crime is an emergency, Vice Council Chair J.B. Smiley said. This is why city council members feel they need to take some kind of action when it comes to how far away first responders are allowed to live from the area they serve. The city of Memphis has to respond in a way that doesn't conflict with state law, but creates an appropriate safeguard so we can adequately serve or exceptionally serve the people of Memphis, Smiley said. According to a 2022 Tennessee law, first responders cannot be bound by residency requirements. However, the law does allow municipalities to set maximum response time, which relates to how quickly a first responder can report to work before the shift starts. Right now, that window is set at 2 hours. 2 hours, it seems, is not sufficient, Smiley said. So we've got to engage in those conversations. The conversation comes from after Mayor Paul Young and Chief C.J. Davis announced on Monday that Sean Jones had been dismissed from the police force. They say his dismissal was due to concerns about morale, but the decision came days after it was discovered that Jones was a permanent resident of Georgia. Both Young and Davis made it clear that Jones did not have a home in Memphis Sorry. Both Young and Davis made it clear that Jones did have a home in Memphis and that attendance was never an issue with him. But council members still expressed concerns on Tuesday. The idea that the number two person that Chief Davis said over and over again that she relied on heavily could not be here within 2 hours is problematic. Councilmember Jerry Green said, even if it's not illegal or against policy at this point. So the plan now, the city council says, is to discuss whether to change that 2 hour maximum to something less to follow state law and keep Memphis safe as it can be. We have to work to find a policy that appropriately serves the people of Memphis, but also allows first responders the choice to choose where they live, Smiley said. It's worth noting the city does offer some incentives for first responders to live in Shelby County, including a homebuyer assistance program and take-home car options. Yeah, I think that this really, when it all boils down to it, it doesn't really apply well to people that actually have their feet on the ground every single day in the street. Those officers that you see driving around in the patrol cars, they live in Memphis for the most part, are very close. This applies to the leadership and people that are more or less in administration, first responders. And when I think about this, I think about the Memphis Police Department, and I think about the fire department, and I think about, obviously, fire department includes ambulance and all the rest. But for me, I believe that this is more applicable to leadership and maybe a few like higher ranking, maybe one or two of the people that are in the street every single day, in the trenches, so to speak. So it's a fight that I think you and obviously leadership does play a large role, because if something major does happen and you're called to respond immediately, that leadership is real important. Now, the people that are on shift work, even if they did live further than 2 hours, I think if they live further than 2 hours out there, they're not working for any of the first responding agencies here in Memphis. So I don't think that it applies, even if they live 45 minutes out. Because I would imagine if they shortened it, they're going to shorten it to something like an hour, 60 minutes. Because 30 minutes really isn't, that could probably cover Millington. And people probably drive in from Millington. So it can't be any lower than an hour at most. And this is really targeting your administrative, your leadership, those types of roles. So, I mean, and I say that to say, I'm not sure whether or not that affects you and I in these neighborhoods, because what we need is people that are on the streets and visible, so that when things happen, one, it slows the amount of things that happen, because they know that police officer is sitting at the gas station right there. So I'm not going to go try to walk behind this man, stick him up and try to take his car or whatever he has on his person. Now let's take it, for example, if there was a natural disaster or something major happened here in the city of Memphis, Lord forbid. But if that did happen, and I don't know what policies are to bring people in that might not have been on the shift but need to be on shift. I'm not sure if this even necessarily applies to them. The only people I can really think of that would be called in a moment's notice that's outside of their shift are people that are in those management type positions. So, this is going to be something that will be continually discussed. So I wanted to bring this back up, because when they talk about it in the next council meeting, I'd like to hear the questions, or I'd like to hear the questions, the answers, and some of the decisions that are being made, to see whether or not, to see what direction they're going in with this particular policy or this particular line of, with what they're doing. But it'll be interesting for sure. I can't wait to see kind of how this whole thing unfolds, to be honest. All right, on to the next one. And this has something to do about this supercomputer deal that we hear about coming to Memphis.